Chorus Voices, the podcast brought to you by Chorus, a fresh approach to community service. Settle in, listen in, and enjoy the voices who bring you reflections, musings, and stories from our community.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Chorus Voices. I'm CEO Dan Minchin.
And I'm Head of Brand and People, Lou Forster.
Now today, Lou, we're going to go a little deeper into the topic of dementia and living with dementia, but really the ripple effects that dementia can create in the lives of many people.
Yeah, we had a great conversation with Jason Burton last episode, part one of these two episodes on dementia. And we also introduced a lovely pair of ladies, Sarah and her mum Blanche.
And so you've had a couple of chats with Sarah and you've sort of been following her online for a while, Lou. So why don't you just give us a bit of Sarah's story and then we might hear from her.
Yeah, okay. Well, we both studied our MBA at the University of Western Australia and got introduced to each other by a mutual friend, a peer. And for some reason, we just didn't end up meeting up at the time. This was a few years ago, but we stayed connected online. I've been following Sarah's story and Blanche's story, her mum, because Sarah started just documenting and telling the story of their lives with an amazing sense of humour and humility and love. And so I actually felt like I knew her before I reached out to catch up, and she was very generous. Both of them were very generous to spend a bit of time and to share their story.
And she's had a obviously very challenging but a pretty profound experience of living with dementia, Sarah this is, and so let's have a listen to her insights, her journey, her stories about living with dementia.
I mean, I only walked through to get to Blanche's room, but that felt like home, or her little kind of mini apartment. I felt like home while we were having our chat and tea. And then we talked about home quite a bit as well. I think there was a bit when I was talking to Mum about being a home bird, because I think I was asking her where she liked to go. God, I really just quite like staying here.
You should tell Lou about Dean, the laundry man.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Is it?
The laundry man.
Excellent. I don't mind a bit of window shopping if there's a...
Oh, you've got it, haven't you?
Yeah.
If you don't get anything.
No.
He's lovely, isn't he?
He's gorgeous.
Yes, he's nice.
We're 99% sure he's gay, so he's safe from your
Window
grasp.
shopping.
Yeah.
Blanche.
Well, you're not completely convinced.
There's some big wishful thinking happening.
He's gorgeous. I like him.
He's a really nice guy.
He is nice.
Comes
He
in
is
and
nice.
has a chat. I came in one day to find them dancing to Rage on a Saturday morning.
So that sense of home is really important. And what was the transition like for you from home, where home was for Mum to where home is for Mum now?
So the transition wasn't what we expected at all. So Mum's condition was deteriorating last year quite significantly. And my mum is a really fiery... she's a firecracker and a really, not a woman to be reckoned with. And we couldn't get our head around how we would transition Mum. And unfortunately, she had a really bad fall out in the garden and sustained quite a severe head injury and was in hospital for a number of weeks. And during that time, her cognitive abilities had really significantly reduced to the point where the doctors had said to us, there is no way that Blanche will be able to go home, even with in-home care and that sort of thing. It was really beyond my dad's and my capacity to look after her in the way that she needed looking after. So the decision was made that she needed to be transitioned to a secure care facility. And so it was that mad rush of we knew she had about a week until she was discharged. To find someone's home in that period that was probably one of the worst weeks of my life, because I didn't want Mum to go into transition care if I could avoid it, because I have seen transition care and the standards are not great. I knew my mum would find that environment really distressing. So in that week, I spent a lot of time driving from nursing home to nursing home that had vacancies.
What would your advice be to somebody else who might be embarking on that crazy journey and trying to find somewhere?
I think having a supportive and understanding family is really important. So you need people around you just to give you a lot of love and support and freedom in that time just to focus on what you need to do. I think workplaces need to be particularly flexible and understanding, and that was something I found really challenging with both my mum and my nana when I was looking for care for them, was that my workplaces were not at all supportive. And yes, they would give me, I think you get 2 days carers leave a year, and that is not anywhere close to sufficient. And so you quickly churn through your annual leave and your sick leave, and it got to the point where I quit my job. Along with that comes, I think, significant financial disadvantage and an impact on your career.
The economic benefit to society of unpaid family care is astronomical, like when they've tried to put figures on it. So
Huge.
Fair enough, each employer bearing the burden's a terrible word, but having to fund that is tricky. But as an economy, it's it's a huge investment to support people, to support their families.
Absolutely. And I'd asked my workplaces, I was with one workplace with my nana, and then I had transitioned when I was with my mum, and I'd asked both if I could go part-time just for a period, and both had declined that. It was flexibility, and similarly like how we do with parents of newborns and that sort of thing. I think this is a largely unrecognised issue, and one that needs to be acknowledged and dealt with and talked about, and how we can deal with it, because we've got an ageing population.
Absolutely.
And we now have men and women in the workplace, and I think it's hard.
So you talked about your transition, and now you have your own business.
So I started up an aged care consultancy to help families like my own with that transition, so particularly for people who do work full-time or might be not living in the same city and that kind of thing. I hire myself out as a social worker to help families. I also did it so that I could have that flexibility. And I really did that because I was noticing I like to take my mum out as often as I can, and taking mum out on a weekend is really difficult just because of the volume of people in a cafe or in a shop or at the park. Mum's behaviour can be quite unpredictable, and she might say things out loud that you don't necessarily want lots of people to hear, because it can be misinterpreted or just might not be appropriate to the situation. So I take mum out on a Monday and a Friday, either in the morning or the afternoon, because it's a lot quieter. So we go to the local shops. The cafe has got to know us that we go to, and I think they've picked up sort of what's going on with mum. And it's really nice, and mum feels really comfortable, and they have the right level of music playing that kind of just drowns out the conversation, which is good. I think I've apologised maybe once or twice for something that she might have said, but they're just really nice people, and she feels really comfortable there. And we still try and go to different places as well. Because mum's life is so routine. Breaking that routine as well is important.
The reason I felt like we knew each other so well is because you share a lot of the stories of your own life, but also of Blanche's stories and yours with her, which I find fabulous. I know that other people do, because you get loads of comments. You're an amazing storyteller. I felt like I knew Blanche before I met her as well, and had so much awe for her.
My mum is a fiery person, and will always be, and she's always been really protective of me as her only child. We were listening to Elvis Presley, and mum said to me, "Oh, what song is that?" And I picked up my phone to have a look, and at that moment at the traffic lights, a police officer pulls up next to us on a motorbike and looks in, and of course the lights go on. We turn the corner and he pulls me over, and he was a police officer on a mission, and I'd apologised for what I'd done, and he gave me the fine. My mum wasn't very appreciative, really, of the tone that he was taking with her daughter, and sort of leant over me and told him to F off, D-head. In quite an assertive tone. So I was like straight out of the car and apologising profusely to this police officer and trying to explain the situation. As we managed to sort of dissipate the tension, and as he was driving off, I hear from the passenger seat, F the police. I'm like, oh my God.
Well, it's a kind of funny story, but it also then does make you kind of think, well, how in tune are people around us to everyone else's needs? And I know that when we spoke to Jason Burton from Alzheimer's, he talked about that. He says it's less about the person with dementia and it's more about everyone else's intolerance.
Absolutely. And I got out of the car and shut the door to talk to the police officer because I didn't want Mum to overhear the conversation, because I had to disclose to him that she's got dementia, and I knew that if she overheard that would only escalate the situation further. She would inevitably get out of the car and be incredibly upset and angry and unmanageable. So it was a really stressful situation, but I could also see the humour in it. It was a really funny, just because it was so inappropriate, and you don't expect a little 78-year-old woman to be swearing profusely at the police. I started doing the Facebook stories. It was never a conscious thing, and it started really when my nana was still alive. She passed away early last year, but before my nana went into care, she was living at home. My mum and nana are both mad keen Cliff Richard fans, and my nana had a calendar hanging on her wall of a shirtless Cliff Richard and in her kitchen. And I remember commenting on, like, writing a little thing on Facebook saying, I don't know how many 89-year-old women have pictures of shirtless men in their kitchen. I doubt it's many. And I think when you've got two people in your life of such significance and you spend so much time with them, and it is really sad to see two people that you love slowly deteriorate. It's not all bad, and there are lots of really funny moments, and you really need to, I think, hold on to them, because they're what keeps you going. They're what builds your resilience. And I think when we look at social media, there is so much negativity out there, and there is also lots of really glib, meaningless kind of memes, and it all just gets a bit same or a bit tiring. I could see I was starting to get positive feedback from the little stories I was writing, and I was like, I think this could be something that's meaningful but makes people laugh and also helps them understand a disease that's largely misunderstood. And there's also a catharsis for me in that it's nice to have joy around something that's so sad. So
the joy is just like Jason picked up on that, and we were talking before about that. This 7 domains of well-being, and there is so much joy with Blanche, and you've got that. You've got that little glint in your eye, and just it's great to share that. It's fabulous.
Been nice to be able to record that and to be able to look back on it. And so, like, when I have Facebook memories pop up, and I had that of my nana the other day, where her shirtless Cliff Richard in the kitchen popped up, and it made me laugh. And it was, if I hadn't have had Facebook, I can't imagine where else I would have recorded those moments. And I am very open about my life, and I talk about lots of different life experiences.
But you are an incredibly good writer and storyteller, and I know because I have laughed out loud reading your posts, and I have shared them, with people I know, not, reposting or anything, but I often read the comments, and other people are like, they spat my tea out, or I just laughed out loud. So you definitely, bring a lot of joy to other people's lives as well.
Because people now know what I'm going through and what my life looks like. There's nothing hidden, and probably one of the best things has been that now I have friends reach out to me who are going through similar things. And it's not necessarily even with dementia. It can be any number of illnesses in their family. And people say, I've read your post and I'm going through this with my mum who has cancer, or, a friend who's got MS and that kind of thing. So it creates a dialogue which I think otherwise maybe wouldn't happen.
So that sounds like that gives you something back. What else do you do to look after you, Sarah?
I'm very mindful about my self-care, and it's a daily thing for me. So I take it really seriously. I've suffered burnout before. When I helped my nana transition into care probably 4 or 5 years ago, that was a really, really difficult time. And I guess because it was my first time navigating the aged care sector, I felt like I had a bit of a nervous breakdown at the end of that and had to take time off work just to recoup. So now my self-care really looks like meditating every day. It looks like going to the beach as often as I can, resting when I need to, accessing friends and family, gardening, cooking, just doing things that I enjoy. And I think, probably prior to really going down the advanced dementia journey with my mum and nana, work was very, very important to me, and I was very competitive, and it was all about work and study, and it's a lot less about that now. So I take my business really seriously, but I try and embed it just more into my life, and I don't really see my work as my work. It's just a part of my day that's really nice and that I enjoy. I think I'm a lot more mindful about trying to see the beauty in the world. I think
there's some pearls of wisdom in there, and you hear the adage, when people work in palliative care and they talk to people about, regrets, what they wish they'd done more or less of, no one ever says they wish they worked harder. Your
life should be something that, as much as possible, I think does have joy in it on a daily basis. And of course life is hard and it's hard work, but I think it's just how you mindfully create your life. So I feel like I've recreated mine a lot to fit a lot more around my family and my friends, because my friends are equally as important to me as my blood relatives.
It's all about people.
It's all about people. It is. It's all human connection. And pets.
I remember reading a quote about something like, a lot of people will walk into their house and their dog gets so excited and people kind of ignore the dog.
Brush it aside.
Like when Amanda and I had Harry, it was, we'd read that and we're like, no, that's so true. So we would always, as soon as we
make a fuss of
him because he makes a fuss of you. And it was such a nice way to enter your home at the end of the day. Because they bring such joy.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah.
I love how they don't know how long you've been gone. So you've been gone 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you come back and they're like, you're back! And you're like, yeah. But it's,
Oh, they're lovely. They're lovely.
But then there's something wonderful about cats too.
Cats and dogs. I love them both.
I feel like I've come out the other end of this in a really good position, and it's been a really good learning curve, and I'm glad I've learnt these life lessons earlier when I'm 38 than later on in life. I feel like I've gained enormous perspective, and that's a real privilege to have.
I think that's an incredible achievement to have found purpose and meaning and a good life, I think.
Wow, what an extraordinary story. And
both of them were amazing, actually. The hour or so that I spent with Sarah and Blanche in Blanche's space, little apartment, was just amazing. And I think even not having my grandparents or anyone, older relatives here, it was just fun to hang out. And of course, we didn't really talk about dementia. We were just spending time together and telling stories and just enjoying tea together. So that was really powerful. I came away really buoyed by that. And then having the conversation, just myself and Sarah, and just really understanding her journey and how it's impacted every part of her life.
Yeah, she's obviously had to really rethink her own life, and including her work, and that was an interesting angle for Chorus as an employer, I guess, was to reflect on what Sarah's experience has been of trying to work through living with someone close to her who's living with dementia.
Yeah, I think it did definitely make me think about how we as an employer, and one of the areas I kind of look after at Chorus, how we can be supportive to the people that work with us, and not so rigid that, if a government stipulate that caring responsibilities are for children, your children, actually we have very complex caring responsibilities and flexible needs, because lives are interwoven and complicated, and it really told me a story of how if we as employers aren't flexible, we're not going to get the best out of people, because someone like Sarah is going to say, no, family's more important, and I'm going to make that my priority, and potentially take talent away from work.
I met a guy a few years ago who's an Australian bloke who he and maybe his brother had set up a company, originally a not-for-profit, focused on supporting people living with dementia after a personal experience of their own. He'd gone to England and had continued down this path and eventually turned it into a company that went to employers and talked to employers about the impact the caring obligations on their employees was having on them as a company. And they had some research that something like 1 in 9 people in your average company is a carer at some, whether it's with kids or parents or relatives or people living with disability or whatever. And this had a massive economic impact, absenteeism, disengagement, all this sort of stuff. So employers who were able to build a toolkit and some support around people who were who were carers could get a real benefit. And that did very well as a company, because progressive employers recognised that this was a reality that they had to deal with.
And I thought of you actually when I was having this conversation, because some of the work that we are doing at Chorus is around individuals, then organisations and the system, because we're not isolated. And really this is potentially a systemic issue, because society-wide, if it was an industry, unpaid caring, it would be the biggest industry going. So what are your thoughts on that, how we think about it systemically?
The fact that we don't measure and capture the economic value of unpaid caring work it just completely skews our view of society and the economy. And there's some really interesting work going on in that space to try and recognise the value that creates. And if that was visible in the economic data, then we would make a lot of different policy decisions, because we would recognise, as you say, that if that was paid work, that would bankrupt countries, right? So there's that whole angle on it. The other thing that came to mind listening to that story and to think about the way the system works and to connect to the Royal Commission, which has found that the aged care system, if you like, is built on transactional interactions rather than relationships. And I actually think that what we're seeing now with the level of abuse, and it's absolutely in the minority, but it happens, the abuse and the corruption that exists in the system we live in, is quite possibly a product of the fact that older people have historically been a part of society that is relatively invisible. And what we know from many, many Royal Commissions in many, many areas, that if a system is invisible and not open to scrutiny, corruption and abuse happens. That seems to be, sadly, the human story. One of the things that gives me optimism is that things like this commission will put the lives and the value of older people front and centre in society. And I think as we age as a society, that voice will become politically more potent and it will start to change. And what we have to do is adapt as a society to this completely different demography. We in many ways, the system works for a demography which was true 50 years ago. It's different now, and this is just one little example we've heard about today, is that here's a very talented person who's had to completely change her life to deal with the fact that she's living with not just her mum but other relatives living with dementia, and the system hasn't been able to adapt to that, so she's had to find a different path. But there's a real challenge and a real opportunity for us now. Yeah.
When you were talking about how society views and recognises people, it reminded me of something Jason Burton said in part 1 of these two episodes, and that was around he sees some of the systemic issues being that there's an us and them view. And for him, we're all individuals and those 7 domains of well-being apply to all of us equally. And when we can start to see everyone as equally important and part of society, then, we might get somewhere in addressing some of these inequalities.
I think that's right. Somehow we need to rehumanise the system, if you like, and what that starts with is the one-on-one relationship that Jason spoke very eloquently about. Is that when I'm sitting here looking at you as a person with dementia and thinking that you're somehow different from me, that's where it starts to break apart. We need to go back to that one-on-one relationship, and then the relationship with my friends, family and neighbourhood, and then build that back into and design that back into the way the system works. That's it's a broad vision. I'm not quite sure what that actually practically means, but it's the sort of stuff that we're really trying to experiment with at Chorus, and there are other organisations and deep thinkers around the country and around the world who are on this path.
And we no doubt think that there'll be some podcast content on this coming. So as we learn and discover, we will share.
Yes, this is true. So maybe that's a conversation for another day. So look, it's been a great couple of episodes, and I hope listeners have been able to pick up some lessons and some insights and perhaps some inspiration.
Definitely. And I'd also just like to thank Jason Burton, both Blanche and Sarah, and also Jackie and Andy Creighton, who we talked about in part 1 as well. So thanks to them, and thanks to you, Dan.
Thanks, Lou.
Thanks for listening to Chorus Voices, the podcast brought to you by Chorus. If you like our show and wanted to know more, check out our website at chorus.org.au. And please leave a review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it helps others find us and enjoy the podcast as well. Join us next time for more inspiring stories and news from our community. Chorus, a fresh approach to community service.